Hello, my name is John Sherman, and this is my senior project. I decided to build a pinhole camera, and then along with that, I decided to learn a lot about photography and how photos work and the art of photography itself. So the first thing I did for the senior project was actually making a pinhole camera. I made it out of a Pringles can and a bunch of other household items that I found around my house. So the first thing I did was I cut the Pringles can about a third of the way from the bottom. I tried to make it as even and as flat as possible, but it was kind of hard. Then what I did was I poked a hole right through the bottom of the can in the metal part, just like the size of a pin, a bobby pin. That's why they call it a pinhole camera. The next thing I did was I took wax paper and I cut it in the shape of the opening of the Pringles can, and I taped it to the bottom part that I had put the hole in previously. The next thing I did was I taped the top of the Pringles can back onto the bottom of it, and I had to make sure that the tape was opaque so that no light could come into the camera besides from the little hole. And afterwards I realized that there was still a little bit of light bleeding through, so I covered it in tinfoil and covered the tinfoil in duct tape just to make sure that no light would come in. So the final product was an opening at the top where you put your eye in with wax paper almost in the middle and a pinhole on the bottom. The kind of camera that a pinhole camera is, after doing research and building the camera, I realized I couldn't take real photos with it. The only way that would have been possible is if I had bought a pinhole camera that processes film, but I just felt like that was against the idea of the senior project where I'm making the products and using my own skills. So the type of camera that a pinhole camera is called a camera obscura, which in Latin means dark room. Here's a 2-minute video that just explains how it works.
Camera obscura. Camera is the Latin word for room or chamber. Obscura is the Latin word for dark or darkened. So the camera obscura is basically just a darkened room. Any kind of room can become a camera obscura, even a small box. First, we have to make sure our box is completely dark inside. Then we'll cut a small opening to allow light to come in. We can put our camera obscura in the landscape. Rays of light reflect off objects in the landscape and bounce off in all directions. Most of the light will be scattered, but some will make it through the opening in our camera obscura. The reflected light will be the same color as the object in the landscape. Light reflects off other objects too. All of the spots of light combine to form an image on the back of the camera obscura. If the opening in the camera is large, the rays of light are large. This makes a bright projection because a lot of light is allowed in, but it also makes a blurry picture because the projections are large and overlap quite a lot. If the opening in the camera is small, the rays of light are small. It makes a darker picture because less light is allowed into the camera. It also makes a sharper picture because the projections are smaller and do not overlap as much. You'll notice that the projection is always upside down and backwards. This is because light travels in a straight line.
So the next part of my senior project, I looked to actually taking pictures and using real photography skills and researching what makes a particular type of photo good. To help me with this, I contacted my uncle and interviewed him. I wouldn't say an avid photographer, but he likes taking pictures, especially when him and his partner Jim go on, vacations to pretty exotic and photogenic places. He taught me a lot, I would say, about photography and what goes into taking a picture and sort of a mindset that you have to have. He told me about the importance of looking at details in a picture and focusing on details, but also making sure that there is a larger, bigger picture. finding a balance is very important. And he also emphasized the importance of today editing your picture after it's taken, because if there's that technology available, why wouldn't you use it? So I did use it for my pictures that you'll see soon. The first kind of photography that I decided to look at was portrait photography, just because it was the photography, the style of photography that I felt like I was most comfortable with personally. And after doing research, I found out that there's a few key points to taking a good portrait photo. It needs to be personal, it needs to be emotional, it needs to be detailed. You need to be able to see almost what the subject of the photo is feeling when that photo is taken. And at first I was going to try to take a portrait of one of my family members, but none of them wanted to do it. So I just took a self-portrait. So you can't really see a huge emotional aspect of the picture, but I tried my hardest. And the next kind of photography that I decided to take a look at was abstract photography, which after like doing research and figuring out the ins and the outs of all these different kinds of photography, I found that I liked abstract photography the most out of the three kinds that I looked at. Essentially what abstract photographers do and what the style is that you take a normal thing or something you usually overlook, something you take for granted in your everyday life, and you give it a new perspective. And so my subject for my abstract photo was actually a box of tissues that I had sitting on my desk. And I realized, there was a pretty cool pattern on the side. So, taking it from a different angle, zooming in, editing it, I made it look like something totally different, just a pattern, a random pattern, which is sort of the essence of abstract photography. The third and final kind of photography that I decided to look at was landscape photography. This is probably the most common form of the three, that or portrait photography. It's almost a toss-up, but people going on vacations, not as seriously as my uncle, but tourists, vacationers, people like to take pictures of the scenery around them. The real art and style of professional landscape photography and serious landscape photographers is very connected to nature. Most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time, the subject of a landscape photo is nature, unless you do what I did. I actually took a cityscape photo of the New York City skyline. I went first to get to the spot where I got to take the picture. I went on probably an hour-long hike through a reservation with a really great vantage point for the city. And on the hike, I tried to see if I could connect with nature on some sort of level and think like a landscape photographer would, think like my uncle would. He was very into nature, and what inspired him to take pictures was his surroundings and the beautiful scenery around him. I think at the end of the day, I walked away from this project with more of an understanding and definitely more of an appreciation for the art of photography and taking pictures. I actually came away really liking it a lot more than I thought I would, and I probably am gonna take pictures more often and really try more often when I take my pictures, because at the end of the day, anybody can really take a good picture, and I think that's a huge takeaway also. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to listen to my senior project. Goodbye.